The next section in Unit 2, what we'll be talking about is offloading your deal privately. So now that we've covered how to sell with a real estate agent and we've gone over the different methods they have and the different types of listings you can go by and the main kind of pros and cons of why you should be using a real estate agent, we're going to be talking about how you can actually sell privately and how you can actually maximize your profits via the private method as well. So there's a number of methods that I've put down on the screen here, and you can sell through TradeMe or realestate.co.nz. There's private selling websites you can approach as well, certain newspapers and networking, which is poaching buyers from open homes, which is a really interesting topic I'll be talking about. There's also Facebook groups and open forums and home buyers and investor groups online that you can be a part of as well. And of course, there's selling to your database that you can build over time. So we're going to be covering all of these different methods and the private selling privately and seeing what methods would work best for you guys and kind of the pros and cons of each method as well. So let's just go over them. So when it comes to selling privately and selling the property yourself, online mediums are a very good method to get your property out there and in front of the buyers that you need. So the online mediums that I personally use myself is TradeMe, realestate.co.nz. HomeSale is another website that primarily focuses on private sellers, so it's actually a good source to pick up deals from. I personally haven't sold on HomeSale because I know that the general buyers mainly on TradeMe and through realestate.co.nz, and there are also websites that actually target local or international buyers in other languages or in a foreign country. And if your property you feel that it may attract certain types of buyers from different ethnic backgrounds, for example, I know that new builds or brick and tile two-story new builds are very sought after by the Chinese market or the Asian buyer market. It may pay to actually advertise in the marketing related to these Chinese buyers, which may be through an online medium like WeChat, which is an app that predominantly the Chinese use, or it could be through certain newspapers, local newspapers that are actually advertised in Chinese or Mandarin. And and again, it could be the case that should your buyer attract maybe an Indian buyer, you want to go through the advertising mediums that best fit the type of buyer that you're looking for. So let's look at the actual pros and cons when you are using the online medium. And there are a lot of pros, but not that many cons. And it's a medium that I definitely use every time that I look at selling privately. So one of the first very big advantages is that, everyone that's actually looking at the properties or looking at the properties you're looking at selling will be using these mediums. In fact, I don't know anyone that looks for property that doesn't actually use TradeMe or realestate.co.nz. It's extremely good value for money in terms of how many impressions or how many people it can actually reach. It also allows viewers that aren't local to also be in the running because other foreign buyers or other real estate agents can also look at these websites because they're very prominent. It's up on the websites till it sells. So that's another big benefit, is that you don't have to keep paying more money or pouring more money into it until it actually sells, because unlike traditional media such as newspaper or television ads, there's only so much frequency your ads can be displayed before you have to pay the service providers again. For an advertisement on television, it may be the case that you get 2 slots in a certain time for each day for the whole week, and that might set you back $5,000, right? But to do it again next week, if the property still hasn't sold, well, that's going to cost you another $5,000, and it can end up being really, really expensive. Versus selling it through the online mediums, it's actually really good because it's up onto the website till it actually sells. And I'll let you guys in on a little secret that even if the property is even sold, sometimes I leave the listing on there just for a couple of extra weeks so that I can continue getting the phones ringing for buyers that are looking for properties in that area. And I actually add those buyers onto my buyers database. Should I get another property that is somewhat similar to the one they're looking for, it's very easy for me just to do a quick blast out, and I actually avoid the agents and anyone in between, and I can go straight to the buyer and offer them the property that I next pick up. So that's one of the awesome advantages of using the online medium. So you really want to take advantage of it, and if you can build a buyer's database, because the property is going to still stay on the website whether it's sold or not, please go ahead and do that, because it's going to allow you to easily sell the property to your next buyer a lot faster. Now, the disadvantage is, of course, it does cost money, but to me, when I look at kind of advertising on these mediums, it's more of the case that it's an investment rather than a cost. So although it may cost anywhere between, kind of $500 or all the way up to even $1,000, depending on how you want it placed and if you want big headlines and better pictures and whatnot, look at it as more as an expense and don't look at it as a cost, because this is always the medium I'll be using when it comes time to selling privately. So the next medium we're going to be talking about when it comes to selling privately yourself is newspaper and the property press. And guys, if you don't know what the property press is essentially a kind of newspaper online catalog of all the local properties that are actually up for sale or listed with the real estate agents, or even if you want to list it directly yourself. Now, there are benefits when it comes to kind of more traditional media like the newspaper and the property press. And some of those pros are that, you're working with a tangible visual piece of advertising. And what I mean by tangible is that it's something that you can actually hold. So it's something that you can actually hold physically in your hand or give to another person, whilst you're actually having your morning coffee or your morning tea. And the kind of newspaper and property press is kind of more targeted to more traditional buyers. And what I mean by that is the older crowd that may not actually use the online mediums that I talked about earlier. And some of these buyers can be the elderly investors or people that just don't use the internet. And you don't want to kind of detract from these buyers as well, because they are still genuine buyers and they may be the buyer that actually ends up buying your property. However, I find that with kind of the traditional marketing methods as newspaper and property press, it really depends on what property you have that would be fitting to attract these traditional buyers. So, I mean, if we're talking about a kind of brand new home, a 2-story brick and tile home, it may not be best suited for kind of the newspaper or attracting these traditional buyers, because maybe they're after more investment properties and they're not after a home owner occupied property. So it really depends case on case on the actual type of property that you have and what marketing methods you should be using, depending on what audience you are trying to target as well. Now, having the newspaper or the property press can also give you a high frequency. And what I mean by frequency is that people viewing the actual newspaper or the actual property advert more than once. And why it can be high frequency is if you have the newspaper on your coffee table, it can be the case that, the husband has read it in the morning and the wife, she's getting back from work and she reads it in the evening, or, any other people, any other family members or friends that actually stop by the house can also read the property press or that newspaper as well. And there's actually more than one frequency when it comes to viewing the ad. So often, newspaper ads do cost more, and you can see on the con section there that it can cost $500 plus for adverts with imagery and text. And this can actually cost a lot more depending on how big you want the images to be displayed, and if you want a full front page ad or if you want a full page ad, all of these things would differ in terms of pricing. And it does actually have a lower reach versus the online medium, because you can't actually reach as many impressions or as many eyes as we call it. And the reason for that is because one newspaper might actually have 2 or 3 people viewing it, but other people that get the newspaper might not even read it at all. Versus when I put it on Trade Me, it's actually people that are warm or at least have an interest in the tagline of the property, or at least can see an image of the property before they actually click into it. And you can get some really good statistics when you're working with the online mediums, because you can actually see how many unique visitors has actually come onto your listing on your actual online advert, versus a traditional kind of newspaper or property press. There's kind of less statistics you can actually gain. And although you can get these numbers from the service providers, and they might say that our newspaper goes out to 100,000 people, but there's nothing to actually track whether that it's gone out to these homes, has the people that receive the newspapers, are they actually reading it? So those are some of the things we can't find out with traditional marketing mediums versus using our online mediums, where we can actually analyze things a little bit more closely. And one of the another disadvantages using the newspaper or property press is that you can actually miss out on a lot of buyers if you're not constantly advertising. And what I mean by this is that very similar to a TV advert, and same with newspaper advertising. If you actually pay to go out on the papers, you may actually go out for that particular week. But should you want to continue advertising because the property hasn't sold in just 1 week, and it's typically the case that it doesn't just sell in a week, you're going to have to advertise again and again. And this cost can continue to rack up until you actually sell the property, versus again the the online medium that we talked about. Once you've actually advertised and it goes up online, it can actually stay there until you finally sell the property. And even once you've sold the property, like I said, you might want to leave the listing on a little bit longer, just so you can collect more buyers information and build that buyers database for yourself as well. So I talked a little bit about networking and poaching buyers from open home, which is a very interesting topic. And basically I do this very subtly, because you don't want to be upsetting the agents or kind of intruding on the buyers when they're looking at other properties as well. So how do you actually go about doing networking or poaching buyers from the actual open homes? And it's very straightforward. So you go to the local homes and you basically just talk with the buyers. You get a gauge if they actually have a budget or interested in the current property they're looking at, or if they don't like the property they're currently looking at and would prefer something else. If they are interested to have a look at something else, you want to invite them, grab the details and invite them to actually look at your property. And how you go about kind of networking and ensuring you reach as many possible buyers you can is actually talk to everyone you meet about the property that you have for sale. Again, it's deals are actually done in conversation, not just buying, but it also comes to the case when you're trying to sell a property that deals are done in conversation. So both buying and selling result in conversation. So, I actually have an interesting story to share in regards to the whole networking thing. And, I believe I actually shared it in one of the previous weeks, but, it was a friend's birthday and we were out on a night at the town, and we were at the casino where one of the dealers at the table mentioned she had just been approved for a loan, and she was ready to look at buying a property with her and her partner, and she was just having a newborn, that was on the way. So, she was in the perfect situation to actually be ready to buy. So what I did was I put her on my buyers database. And, shortly after, a few weeks after we chatted for a little bit, she actually came out and had a look at the property that I had to offer. Now, although she didn't end up buying that particular property, she's still on my buyers database and she hasn't yet purchased the property. But I feel that, the next property that we get or the next deals that we do, I feel that I can at least show it to her, and I know that she's not going to be a time waster, because firstly, she's already got her finance approved and she's already pre-approved, ready to go. And secondly, she really does have an interest in wanting to buy a property. So, buyers and sellers can come about from anywhere. And again, you want to be having this conversation with anyone you meet, to talk about the things that you do. And you'll never know, but if you don't actually mention it, you might just find a buyer in your next conversation, or you might just find another vendor that actually wants to sell their property in your next conversation. So, that's how you go about in doing networking. That's also how you actually go poach buyers from open homes. And that's how I started to build my buyers database, by going out to these open homes and kind of just talking with the buyers and letting them know what I do and adding them to my buyers database. And very shortly, you're going to find someone that's going to be willing and wants to actually buy one of the properties you have. And that's going to be very easy for you to kind of construct, because you've already set up everything in place by having that network, by having those buyers ready to go. So let's just go over the pros and cons when it comes to selling privately yourself via the networking method. And there's not a lot of cons that are going to be kind of detrimental to your bank account, but it's more of how it affects you as a person and how you have to change yourself to actually be able to do this successfully. So some of the pros when you're going out and poaching buyers from open homes, or you're doing it via the networking method, is that it's completely free. So if you are starting out, I highly encourage this method, because it gets you out there talking with the agents, talking with other buyers, and kind of getting used to the conversations that you're going to be having on a day-to-day basis revolving property trading. And the best thing is that it's completely free. It doesn't actually cost you $1. The only thing that it does cost is your time and effort to actually go out there and start learning and talking to people. And I think that although it does take up time and effort, it's crucial to actually build your experience in this space for you to actually develop your skills and get better in the space of becoming a property trader. And not only is it free, it does build your network and database so that you can continue to advertise these properties to these buyers and have a higher chance of selling, or even a higher chance of on selling, because you don't have to go through the hassle of settling the property and then listing it on the open market just to find a buyer. You're also working with warm buyers that are already looking to buy. So as I mentioned before with the little example I had with the girl from the casino that I met, she was already ready and willing to buy because she had already been finance approved. She had a newborn on the way and she was looking for a 3-bedroom property. So you're not working with time wasters, and that's one of the big benefits when you are going out to do networking and you are poaching buyers from these open homes, because you won't find many people that are just looking at open homes for the sake of looking for open homes, and you'll find out that people at these open homes genuinely do have a real interest in wanting to buy something. So there are some negatives when it comes to the whole networking method and poaching these buyers from these open homes. You are breaking out of your normal comfort zone. You might get looked at a little bit strange, but you want to do it subtly so that you don't offend the agent and offend the efforts that they're trying to draw buyers just for you to steal them, because keep in mind they are using marketing efforts and paid marketing at that to draw the buyers into the open homes, and you are kind of taking advantage of that situation. So you don't want to openly express to the agent that, hey, look, my name's Peter, I'm here to poach all your buyers. You don't want to be doing that. And you might actually want to have a genuine conversation with the agent, and it's also a good time to actually introduce to the agent what you do, as well as speaking to the buyers as well, because that way you're actually killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're meeting with the agents, letting them know what you do as a business, handing out your business cards, segmenting yourself as the authority, as well as letting the real estate agent know that, hey, if you've got any other properties that fit into this certain criteria, let me know. And who knows, you might actually start to build a buyer's agent just from doing that alone, as well as also getting a few buyers onto your database as well. So you are limited to the amount of homes you can visit, and that is a negative in the whole networking method, because you only have so much time in a day and so much energy that you can go out and view all these homes. So that's I suppose a disadvantage. But surely the networking and poaching buyers method, the pros and the advantages far outweigh the negatives in this case. And given that you don't have to actually spend any money, this is the method I'd be encouraging you guys to go out and do when you're first starting off, because not only are you building experience, you're also meeting the right real estate agents, introducing yourself and explaining what you do. So you're building your buyer's agent as well as actually building your database for your buyers as well. Now these days we have the advantage of using the internet, and the internet connects us with so many like-minded people that may be doing the same things that we do, or are looking for the service that we provide, or at least prepared to buy the properties that we have on offer. So you want to be joining all the relevant Facebook groups and forums where you can introduce yourself and let people know what it is that you actually have to offer, or let them know that you are a private buying company, or the case that you come across a lot of good deals and you're looking for buyers that are prepared to buy these deals off you, whether they want to renovate them or whether they want to buy it for a long-term investment. Now, you don't want to be advertising straight away. You want to actually build some rapport to have the authority to actually post a property for sale as well. Often with these groups or these forums, there are certain guidelines and rules that you have to follow. So it may not be the case that you just jump on straight away and start advertising your properties for sale, because that can actually possibly get you kicked out depending on the rules of certain groups. Now, these groups are often filled with hungry investors ready to buy if the deal is right for them. And I've actually met countless investors that have bought deals directly off me that has helped me with the on-sale process. And it's helped me make hundreds of thousands of dollars in my back pocket, because I didn't actually have to end up going to settle the property myself, or worse, take on the JV money partner option where I'd actually have to be splitting the profits with someone else as well. So as I mentioned, the on-sale option generally speaking is the most effective method where you can realize the most amount of profit. And by doing kind of the method of networking and networking through Facebook and through these open forums allows me to do more of these on-sale opportunities, and that's why I find it so important for you guys to join these relevant groups and start to connect with people and talk to people and build relationships. It's all about building the right relationships in business, and that's what you're doing by connecting with people in these Facebook groups and forums. So let's look at some of the pros and cons when it comes to selling privately yourself by using the networking method of Facebook groups and forums. And this is essentially online networking. And again, I find the pros far outweigh the cons, and some of these pros are that this method is completely free. Again, it only costs you time and effort by going online and messaging these people or sending out emails or introducing yourself on the forum. There's actually a massive amount of investors and first home buyers. Now, Facebook and the internet essentially has pulled together the right people in massive groups where everyone's actually joining all these groups where they have somewhat of an interest in the same subject. So you're going to have a huge list of these buyers just by, kind of essentially talking to everyone on this group. You can actually build business relationships from these groups, and I know a ton of people that I initially did 1 or 2 deals with that are now my JV partners, or they're the people that actually help renovate my property, because without asking you don't get. And it could be us connecting over the fact that we both do property trading, but the person that I'm talking with might say, well, your tradies actually sound really expensive, why don't you use my guys? They don't have any work going on, and I'm sure they'll love it. So it's just basically people helping people out, and it allows you a community in a space to actually build these business relationships where you guys all have kind of the same goals and are interested in the same kind of property investing and property trading method that we're talking about in the Property Academy course. And you can actually reach and connect with people around the country very quickly, as opposed to the negative or the cons of doing the physical networking and going to these open homes. You are restricted to how many open homes or how far you can drive. But with Facebook and with the internet, we can actually connect with hundreds and thousands of people around the country very, very quickly. Some of the negatives are that if you are trying to sell it privately yourself through these online channels like Facebook and some of these forums, is that you might annoy some other people. And again, it's very important to follow the guidelines of these groups to ensure that you don't actually get kicked out. You may be limited to how many properties you might be able to post according to the guidelines. Again, you want to be ensuring you read the rules and the guidelines for all the groups, and you are following the guidelines and you're abiding by those rules. And it might be the case that because you can't post that many properties directly onto the Facebook page or the Facebook group itself, it may pay to actually personally individually message all these different people and introduce yourself, then add them onto your personal Facebook account and kind of connect as friends, and then slowly transition them to your actual buyers database or your sellers database or your JV money partners database. So this is a really good space to actually connect with people involved in the property trading space, not just sellers, not just buyers, but also getting JV money partners as well. And I can say that's been true for myself, that I've met all these people in this 3 different groups of sellers, buyers, and JV partners, just by connecting with people through Facebook and just by actually sending them a message, saying hello, and then actually catching up for a coffee. So now we're on to the last method of selling privately yourself, which is the database method. And we're just going to take a moment to cover the pros and cons of using the database method. And as I mentioned, you should be building your database at all given opportunities through the networking method by poaching buyers through open homes, and or the method of connecting with people on relevant Facebook pages and groups and open forums that you want to be adding to your list as well. And both these avenues can actually connect you with possible sellers as well as actual JV money partners, and this has definitely been true for me. So some of the benefits of creating your own database is that it's completely free to do. All it takes is a bit of time and effort, and it's not something that you just do once and actually put to the side. It's actually an ongoing exercise, and it's an ongoing activity. But the reason why you want to be doing that is because again, having a big database increases your chance of being able to do an on-sale, which is effectively the most efficient way of property trading that involves the least amount of work on your half, the least amount of hassles, as well as earning the biggest profit margins as well. The next big benefit is that you are reaching people that are all considered warm buyers. Why I consider them warm is because I only really put people onto the buyer's database if they've already been pre-approved for finance, so they're ready to go, and I don't have to wait for someone to put in a conditional period for finance and loan when they're writing in an agreement, or they're investors that know what they're doing and they have bought properties in the past. So we're talking about warm buyers. And with warm buyers, we can see the advantage below is that they're actually easy to deal with. And I like people that are easy to deal with because it means I don't have to spend so much time and effort explaining things to people. And I find the hardest buyers to work with are the first home buyers that don't really know what to do. They've never bought property before and they don't even have a loan in place. And they're going out and writing offers only to realize that they don't even have a loan or can get a loan approved for the amount that they're actually writing in. And that can be a nuisance working with these very inexperienced people, which is why, again, having a database is a big advantage. It's also a really good way where you can reach a huge amount of people that you've built up over time. And for myself personally, my business personally, I've got thousands of people on my buyer's database, and it's a very small amount of effort it takes me to actually get in front of all these people. So all these people have already agreed to be on my marketing list for any properties that I have coming up. And when I send an email, not only are they quite receptive to it and that they're actually going to open up the emails, it actually doesn't take a lot of effort on my behalf to actually get in front of them. And that's basically me having a proposal or an email or a PDF where I draw up the main points on why the property should be a good investment for you and how much money you can actually make, or how much rent you can actually make, depending on what criteria they're after. And that's another reason with the database, you can actually segment your database to figure out, should I send this property to this certain investor, or should I only send it to this group? And you can actually figure out whether the investor that you're working with or the buyers that you're working with are only after a strong rental yield and they want to buy the properties for a long-term hold period, or whether you want to be selling it to a person that is just purely interested in doing the property up and making some money. So again, having a buyer's database allows you to do that. And again, because it helps you with the on-selling process, you can even reach out to your buyers from time to time and send them out a questionnaire or send them an email just saying, hey, given that I buy a lot of properties both privately and through the market, what is the criteria that you're after, just so that I can kind of update the records on my end. And once a property comes out that fits your criteria, I'll definitely be sending it your way. So that's another big reason on why you should be creating a database and improving it at all times. Now, the disadvantages of a database is that the inquiry rate is based on the size of your database. And of course, when you're starting out, you're not going to have a very big database to begin with. And that also means that when you're trying to sell these properties to the database, that you're probably not going to have a huge amount of traction, or possibly even sell the property to them because you don't have a big list, which is why it's very important to start building this list at any given opportunity. And there's always something you can do in your business, because if you're not going out and getting a deal or meeting with a JV partner, you're out kind of at these open homes, meeting these real estate agents and meeting the possible buyers that you can add to your business. Now, another disadvantage with a database is that it can be time consuming to construct the electronic direct mail that you're actually sending out. But I don't think it's too time consuming at all. It only feels more time consuming if you don't have a big database and you're writing in that email and you're sending it out to them. But even still, it's only one email that you have to send out. The time consuming part is actually constructing all the viewings with all these different buyers that want to see the property, because they may have different times and requests that fit for them versus another buyer that is unavailable only till the weekend. So that means you're going to have to construct viewings around the times that work for them. And there's a lot of kind of back and forth phone calls and kind of discussion on what time would work best for everyone. And it might even pay to not let the buyers dictate what times would work for them, and rather be proactive, so you actually state on the email that goes out to these buyers and say that the first open home or the first viewing is actually on a set date with a set time. That should kind of mitigate the issue of spending too much time constructing a viewing time to actually go out to the property with all your buyers, is to actually give them the time up front first. So how do we exactly build our database? We've talked about building your database by approaching open homes and networking with the buyers that are at the open homes, as well as networking with the online mediums such as Facebook groups and Facebook pages and relevant forums. And you know, I've just got a little breakdown on how you want to be doing it. So number one is use advertising or networking to add to your database. Number two is utilize an email list software to actually make it easy to actually contact your database. You don't want to be writing 100 emails just because you've got 100 people on your actual database. And you know, some of the software that I use, things like MailChimp and stuff like that, which you can find online, and there's a whole bunch of different mailing automation tools that make the whole job easier. Number three is you want to segment your buyers from the first home category versus your investor category. And this just helps because depending on your different property type, you know, if you've got a very good yielding property that brings in quite good rent, that might not mean a lot for a first home buyer because they're only after a property that has 3 bedrooms and a backyard garden for their kids to play in. So it helps to actually segment your database so the properties you send out are actually going to have more relevance to that audience. And you can actually segment it further, not just from first home buyer and investor. You could also do first home buyer, investor that buys and hold the properties for the long term that are just after a good rent, and you can have the categories of investors that are looking to buy and sell just to make a profit. So you know, that further details out your segmentation for the different buyers that you have, and it just makes things more relevant when you're sending the blast out of the property that you have for sale. Number four is segment source of buyers to focus on your ROI. And you want to find out and actually write down a source of where those buyers came from. So if those buyers actually came through an online aspect through Facebook, or actually came through an online marketing campaign that you did on Facebook as well, where you actually spent some money, well, you want to actually record that so you can figure out what methods are getting you the most traction for finding you the buyers or the JV money partners. And the same goes for even sellers as well. You want to figure out if a seller is calling you, where they actually saw your advertisement from, whether it's you know, an online medium, or whether it's a piece of direct mail they've received, or word of mouth, or etc. You want to find that out so you can focus on whatever marketing methods would actually give you a higher return, so you can actually invest more money into that space. Number five is you want to use a CRM tool, which is a customer relationship management tool, to manage your buyers. And the same goes for the sellers as well. You want to use a CRM tool to figure out what stage your buyers are at, if they've already bought something, and the same goes for the sellers as well. If they're ready to sell, or if they're not ready to sell until 6 months later, you want to have a note of that. So the CRM tool will actually remind you or prompt you when it's time to reach out to that seller again, or reach out to that buyer again. And you know, if the buyer has already just bought, it may be the case that you actually want to remove the buyer from your list, or actually follow up with your buyer and figure out when are they next going to have their approval ready for the next property they're wanting to purchase. So all of these are very important things to have you know, kind of noted when you are building a database, and using the tools that I've mentioned, like a CRM tool or email automation software, does help with this process. So guys, on the screen here, you'll see a small snippet just to give you an overview of how we actually propose our property to our database, to the investors, or depending if they're a first home buyer. So in this instance, this is catered towards an investor, and it's actually part of this week's downloadable materials, where you can actually download a example of how we actually propose our property to our database, so you guys can actually go out and replicate the same models. Now there's going to be, you know, the important specs that we cover. There's the price and the terms that we're actually after when it comes to what we want for the property. Of course, we give the investors an idea of the property's description, the opportunity for the buyer itself, so whether they can actually add value by doing renovations, or whether they can just buy it off me straight away and just put it back on the open market to make a profit. We want to give them a few comparisons of recently sold properties in the area, and a real estate agent would be actually able to help you provide this as part of your marketing proposal to your database. And of course, you want to have your phone number and an email address and a few images just kind of detailing the property as well. And other information that I might be providing, such as registered valuations or meth tests and stuff like that, I generally provide in a Dropbox link that can link the buyer to actually go out and download all those materials, because it can look a bit clustered if I'm providing it in just one on a one-page kind of document or a one-page PDF. And again, don't get this confused to how we actually market the property if we were to sell it through trademerealestate.co.nz, and we'll actually be covering a little bit more about that on how we can actually create the perfect marketing ad. So stay tuned for that as well, guys. That's also very important. So guys, much like listing with a real estate agent, there are going to be pros and cons when it comes to selling privately yourself as well. So let's just go over the pros and cons one by one, and you guys can understand why sometimes I privately sell the property myself, and why I also sometimes use a real estate agent to get the job done. So the pros are definitely, when you are selling yourself, there's no commissions involved. So you don't have to worry about paying 20 grand elsewhere to another real estate agent, and often you can actually discount this off from your sales price of the property and market it with that discounted price, allowing the public to actually purchase a property a little bit cheaper, because you don't actually have to factor in the real estate agent commission. Now, another pro is that you are in complete control when it comes to selling privately yourself. You're in full control of the marketing, how much effort you want to spend on it, how much energy and how much marketing budget you actually want to involve when it comes to selling the property yourself. You are very motivated, so you're more motivated than the real estate agent, because at the end of the day, this is your property, and the longer you actually keep the property, the more holding costs you have to actually pay. So the motivation when you are selling it yourself tends to be a lot stronger versus an agent, because at the end of the day, it's not a property they physically own under their own name or under their own titles. So there's not a big of an urgency as it would be if you were to actually do it yourself. You may have more leeway due to not being an agent, because you don't have to follow the REAA guidelines. And the things different with a real estate agent is everything they do has to be disclosed. It has to be very kind of clear cut and very formal. And I encourage you guys doing the same when it comes to private selling yourself. But ultimately, it's up to the buyer's kind of due diligence to find any issues wrong with the property, should there be anything wrong with the issues. Now, I haven't had anything wrong with the properties that I've been selling, but certainly I understand why it may benefit when it comes to selling yourself, because it's up to the purchaser to actually go out and, for example, grab a builder report, or it's actually up to the purchaser to go out and find out if there's been a meth test done on the property or not. And some of these things are items that I may not necessarily tick off myself, because if I go out and privately buy a property, I may not actually go out and do a builder's report, because I've done so many renovations, and I can almost guesstimate what the cosmetic renovations will cost. And it may be the case that sometimes I may miss certain things, but it's not for me to disclose everything, because firstly, I may not have actually gone over everything in detail on the property, and secondly, it's more up to the buyers to actually do their due diligence. So that's actually an advantage when it comes to privately selling yourself, because you do have more kind of give room in regards to how you want to market the property, and it's more again based on the purchaser to do their homework rather than being an agent kind of disclosing everything to the buyer. And it's also the case that when I am selling a lot of the times privately, you are working with more investors anyway that tend to understand the process a little bit easier, and they generally tend to be a little bit easier to work with as well. The disadvantages is that you will be talking to buyers, and again, this is where your negotiation skills need to come into play. And if you can't find your feet in the negotiation side of things, you're better off kind of using an agent, because they can help with that process. The paperwork is something that you're going to have to be doing yourself, or assisting with the purchaser to understand how to fill out a sales and purchase agreement done privately. Marketing cost, of course, is on you, depending on how big or how grandiose your marketing you want to be for your property. Can be in the vicinity of $500 all the way up to thousands and thousands of dollars, just depending on how much money you want to throw down. Again, as a rule of thumb, $2,000 is more than enough, whether you're listing with a real estate agent or whether you're actually selling it privately yourself. And lastly, on top of, again, talking with buyers, you're going to have to actually do the negotiation process. And this process is actually going back and forth and realizing that the first offer may not actually be the final offer from your buyer. So don't get offended. You know, I find often with sellers, sometimes they get so offended that they've received a low offer. Well, don't. It's just the normal process of business, and you want to counter back with what actually works with you. And, you know, the more practice you get in negotiation, the better you'll become. And it's not something that you should have a lot of emotional value attached to it and get sensitive if someone actually offers you a very lowball offer, because it's all part of the game. So those are the pros and cons when it comes to you know, selling a property privately yourself. And there's definitely incentives and reasons why you want to do this. And, you know, again, for me, when I have a property, the first option I try to do is to sell it privately myself by doing the on-sale method, because if I can actually find a buyer that will take the property off me, then it just actually allows me to make more money, have more time, that it's not focused on me settling the deal and renovating the property and then selling back on the open market, and I move on to the next deal. So, you know, I encourage the method you guys actually follow is, when you get a property, always try sell it privately by doing the on-sale method first. And if that doesn't work, then what you want to be doing is getting all your general agencies involved as well, and see if they can draw you a buyer. Now, if time is really cutting it close, then unfortunately you will have to go down the route of actually settling the property or using a JV money partner to take on the deal with you, at which point you will be able to have more time because the money is already put down on the property. Either it's your own money, or if it's a JV money partner's money, be conscious of the time as well. You don't want to be taking forever to actually sell a property, because those holding costs are going to start to eat up your profits. So that's the kind of methods I'll go down, is to try sell it privately yourself via the on-sale method to your database or to your network of people. And once you've done that, if that option hasn't worked, you want to get your general agencies on board, at which point, if they still haven't sold it, you then want to settle the property yourself or with a JV money partner, and then possibly have more time to try to sell it privately yourself again, or then actually go use a real estate agent and use leverage the skills of the real estate agent by getting them to go approach their database and using the marketing methods that's worked for them. So those are the pros and cons of selling yourself or going with a real estate agent, and there are benefits in both.